I was impressed. Secondly, these kids had a love for each other that I had never experienced in my life. You know, my friend Rocky, his parents were both alcoholics. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom was affected by all that. You know, these kids had a love for each other that I had never experienced before. I wanted those two things. I was smelling the aroma of life onto life. Didn't know it. Didn't know it at that time. Well, during that time, this was now perhaps 6 months to a year after I received that little 4 spiritual laws. I'm alone in my bedroom. My girlfriend's telling me, oh, well, we are the way we are because of Jesus, you know? So I wanted that. So I pulled out a little green Gideon New Testament. You've seen them. In those days, they were King James only. Now they come in NASB and NIV and other versions, I guess. Pulled out where I got it, I don't know. Thank God for the Gideons, great people. Anyway, I opened it up, King James Version. Couldn't make heads or tails out of it. Closed it, set it down on my bed. Pulled out that 4 spiritual laws. This time I went through it alone. This time I had some content behind it. God has a wonderful plan for your life. Hey, that's great, no problem. But most people aren't experiencing that wonderful plan. Well, I knew that. That's because of sin. Yeah, I'll agree with that. And by the way, the tract went on to say, and I'm paraphrasing it, you guys, by the way, God has nothing to do with sin. He's absolutely holy. So if you've committed even the little tiniest bit of sin, you're in trouble. You're in the judgment end of God. Hey, that really resonated with me, because if I believe that God was out there. And if he was out there, that's the way he was, absolutely holy. If he was out there, and if he designed my hand in this world, that's the way he was. And I knew I was in trouble. Okay? Because, you know, no, I wasn't into Timothy Leary and all that stuff, but I had shoplifted a thing or two. I knew that I was a thief. Okay? So I continued on in the tract, and it said, by the way, you trust in Jesus as your Savior, and he will become your substitute for sin and take care of that sin problem and correct your relationship with God. I wanted that. And so it was a bit of a spiritual battle in my room that day. I paced my room. Finally, I stopped by the window, and I was now at that little prayer. This time, I knew that little prayer at the end of the booklet was not something magical. I knew that it wasn't. I knew that it reflected my heart. So by my bedroom window, I prayed that prayer, and that's where I count my salvation. That moment, at that time, I was about 19 years of age. Well, I had become a believer, but being Jewish meant nothing to me at all at that time. So I got very upset with being in college. I quit the University of Washington. I joined the Army. Everybody was being drafted at that time because the Vietnam War was in full swing. And I knew that if I was drafted, I'd probably march through the rice paddies. So I chose to enlist and become a helicopter crew chief so I would fly over the rice paddies. I felt that was a better option. So, and I met Susan Voss about that time, and we dated. And I went off to Vietnam, and we had a romance by letter. I came back from Vietnam, and we got married on April 26, 1969. Coming up here real soon, 38 years. And we traveled together to my final duty station in Fort Eustis, Virginia. There in Fort Eustis, Virginia, I met a civilian instructor. I was instructing helicopter repair at that time. And we went to a home Bible study. And there my wife got introduced to Jesus at that home Bible study. She became a believer at that time. See, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to marry her. You would never know I was a Christian the first 3 years of my walk with the Lord because I had no follow-up. You would never know it. I did, but no one else would know it. So we got married. She became a believer. We came back to Seattle. And then in 1971, our first son, David, was born, and in 1974, our daughter, Janessa, was born. David still lives in Seattle with his wife. My daughter, Janessa, and her husband live in Portland, Oregon with the 4 grandkids, which I'm going to see them this afternoon and do a Passover Seder down at their church this afternoon. Now, in December of 1979, I met Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum of HaDavar Ministries. He was brought to our church for a prophecy conference. Our pastor and he were roommates in Dallas Theological Seminary. I believe you're a Dallas guy too, right? Are you from Dallas? Yeah, okay. And God used the biblical message presented by Dr. Fruchtenbaum, Matthew 24, verses 37 through 39, in summary form, to convince me that I should be personally involved in presenting the message of Jesus the Messiah to my own Jewish people. And so I began to get involved in Jewish work in Seattle. And in May of 1981, I became Ariel's first volunteer missionary. They had a number of full-time missionaries, and I wanted to get on staff. The only way I could get on staff was to volunteer and to get connected with Ariel that way. So we established the Beth Ariel Center in Seattle, Washington. And we did a Tuesday night Bible study and other programs, and we saw the center effectively disciple Jewish and Gentile believers. We did everything. We mailed out tracts, we handed out tracts, we did Bible studies, we did everything. And as the center grew, I just felt the call to full-time missionary service. So I asked Dr. Fruchtenbaum, is there a spot for me in HaDavar Ministries? He said, yeah, but you got to go to seminary. Oh, gee. Here's a 35-year-old kid with 2 children and a wife, and I got to go to seminary? I got to quit my job and move to some seminary? Well, we sought the Lord for a year, and after a year, all the lights were green. And in September of '84, we moved to Portland, Oregon, where I attended Western Conservative Baptist Seminary, Little Dallas, as it's known. And in order to prepare for a full-time position with HaDavar Ministries, I completed a Master's of Divinity program with a concentration in Jewish studies in 1988. Then in 1989, Susan and I planted a Messianic congregation, Kehilat HaMashiach, the Congregation of the Messiah, in Portland, Oregon. I served as the teaching elder for the first 7 years of the congregation's existence, and we watched the church grow from 15 people in our living room to 140 people in a rented Baptist church in Portland, Oregon. And every year we saw 1 Jewish man come to faith. I am very pleased with that statistic. 7 years that I was at the congregation, 7 Jewish men came to faith. I am very happy with that. And as far as I know, they're all walking with the Lord still today. That's the key, folks. It's not numbers. It's do they make a true commitment and do they continue with the Lord from that point on. So I'm very pleased that the Lord has used me in that way. Now, I still continued of course, I was a missionary for HaDavar Ministries, and I carried out responsibilities with Ariel as a Bible teacher at the camp. I also directed Camp Shoshana. And I was a teacher there. I was a conference speaker. And these ministries took Susan and I across the United States and to Russia and to Germany and to Israel as well. In 1997, I moved to Southern California to become HaDavar Ministries Executive Director. I reorganized the home office. I began their Department of Missions and Training, organized that. I served as a field representative. And then in April of 2001, I began another pioneering work when I became the director of HaDavar Messianic Ministries in Irvine, California. We were attending Irvine Community Church at that time, and I learned that my pastor's dream and my dream were the same, to have a Jewish outreach out of the church and to develop a school of biblical and Jewish studies. So we began HaDavar Messianic Ministries out of the church. See, the church is my mission board. That's what it boils down to. I am officially an employee of the church because the IRS regulations require that, but my income comes from a support team. You folks, this church is part of that support team. And so that money is managed, and I am accountable to the elder and deacon board of Irvine Community Church. So that's how it works. They're a mission board for me. And I'm, of course, my field of service is Southern California. Southern California is the second largest Jewish population center in the United States. We're dead center of 1 million Jewish people, from San Diego to Los Angeles and all around us, 1 million Jewish people. And so everybody down in Southern California has Jewish friends. Now the focus of my ministry primarily consists of teaching the Bible from a Jewish perspective, and that's where this little brochure comes in. The gray brochure will tell you a little bit about HaDavar Messianic Ministries, so you can refer to that. And by the way, if you're at all interested in getting a personal newsletter, this church does receive my newsletter and is out in the rack in the foyer there. But if you're interested in receiving a personal copy, just fill out the inside front cover of this little brochure and rip it off and give it to me, or put it in the offering box, or whatever you do with it, and I'm sure you'll get it to me, and we can put you on the mailing list personally. You can receive the newsletter directly. So that'll tell you a little bit about HaDavar. But the green brochure tells you about the School of Biblical and Jewish Studies. And this is my main ministry outreach. I've been teaching classes now down in Southern California for 4 years. We began by teaching classes out of the church, and they gave me an office in the church for free too. Isn't that nice? My mission board gives me an office and has classrooms. It's a great situation. And the first 4 years I taught classes to find out if this idea was viable at all. After 4 years, and solid interest in the teaching the classes from a biblical perspective, or from a Jewish perspective, we decided that yes, a school of biblical and Jewish studies would be a viable idea. So we went to work putting that together, and it really began at the beginning of this year, January. We had 4 classes going. And so this is the main vehicle that we use. Now, why do we teach the Bible from a Jewish perspective? We do that because 80% of the Jewish people who come to faith in Jesus are won to the Lord through one-on-one conversations with their Christian friends. 80%. Okay? So the folks in my classes are the front lines in winning Jewish people. They all have Jewish friends, every single one of them. Lots of Jewish people down there. And so what I'm doing is I'm teaching them to present the Bible, to learn the Bible, and to present the Bible from a Jewish cultural perspective. That is a perspective that a Jewish person will resonate with most clearly. And it'll speak to them most clearly. So not only do the classes support the personal discipleship of each of the students, but then they allow them to reach out and present the Bible to a Jewish person from a perspective that they can identify with. And believe me, most Jewish people are biblically ignorant today. You probably know a lot more Bible than your Jewish friend if you have one. So that's the value of this school. Actually, doing this ministry was affirmed by an